وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. أشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Inshallah, today we'll be able to conclude Surah Al-Baqarah, and maybe we'll have a lot of time, inshallah, or plenty of time for discussion and questions. As you have seen, it took us, I don't know how many weeks, but many weeks in Surah Al-Baqarah, and again, we're just scratching the surface. We're not really going very deep yet. You can see how loaded the Quran is with guidance and how much we are missing by not studying the Quran on a regular basis and reflecting. It's like somebody who has a lot of wealth available, and they are struggling in life and they're not aware of it. This is a book that is in our very handy in our houses, in our phones, everywhere, in all languages, the audio, video available to reflect or to help in your reflections, yet not many people are doing it. And this is again because of number of misconceptions that became deeply seated and deeply rooted. That has, of course, the whole Islamic paradigm. If you remove the sense of mission from Islam and the maqasid and the goals, it becomes simply a list of rituals to do. And if it is just that, then there is no need to study or reflect or self-development or leadership or unity, or there is no need for this. All what you need is probably a place to pray, like mosque, pray Jumu'ah, and provide some basic services. Other than that, it's a very simple or obsolete religion that consists of a short list of sha'air or rituals, and a short list of do's and don'ts, which everybody can understand in no time. While you're, from childhood, they will tell you that you have to pray 5 times, and there is Ramadan, that you have to fast. Whenever if you qualify, you need to pay zakat, and once in a lifetime, you need to perform hajj if you are capable. And there are a couple of things that you need to avoid, and you're fine. That's the deen that we inherited in. And then even when we're going to spend time, we spend it on issues that are irrelevant, or issues that are minor, or issues that do not exist anymore. Anyway, again, I always want to emphasize this, the need to study the Quran. It's every Muslim must and can reflect on the Quran, and it should be like a lifelong course that a person will take, and continuously, it's continuous learning. Every now and then or actually on a regular basis, you reflect on some verses on the Quran, and then try to find extract some guidance from the text, because there is the text of the Quran and there is guidance. And then try to check yourself against the mirror of the Quran. It's a very good exercise to check yourself spiritually against the verses of the Quran. And again, the main purpose of the Quran, the main purpose after Tawheed, because it is a book of Tawheed essentially, it's basically to explain the mission of believers, individuals and community, and to build those individuals and community for that mission. That's what Islam is all about, and that's what Quran is all about. It's Islam is it's a divine mission with the overarching goals based on the foundation of Tawheed. It's actually mostly civic in nature. The mission of Islam is mostly civic. It's a divine in its origin, it's divine in its ultimate goal, ابتغاء مرضات الله, but in between it's very civic. It's all about uplifting people and serving the greater good and making this world a better place for everybody. And also realizing your full potential through self-development. It's tazkiyah and islah, to be all you can be and to maximize your impact on people and your impact on the society, positive impact. So Quran keeps sketching that profile of the individual that need to be built, and then we keep building it. It's like a sculpture, naht, of the individual and the community. You can see there is a lot of, it's a very, very eloquent, very artistic, sometimes pays attention to details, sometimes focus on the big picture. But again, it's a book, it's a manual to explain Allah, and then explain your mission and its goals, and then build you as an individual and as a community for that mission. So we're done with everything in Surah Al-Baqarah in terms of, especially the last part, which was dedicated to the charity as something that is very essential, and it's not casual. It's a system, yeah. It's a paradigm or a system that is always in many places in Quran, or several places, it is contrasted with the system that is built on interest. One of them is accumulating wealth in the hands of the few, and the other is trickling down wealth to be distributed. So there is the two systems. One is about solidarity and one is about abuse. One builds a very healthy society, and one builds a society that is where people are left behind, and when they are left behind, it's like that's where the source of all problems and trouble. After all of that, after the verse of loans and lending and the amazing details when it comes to charity, how, and answer all the question, what is it that you need to pay and how, and etc. And then the things that you need to avoid to not, so that you don't spoil your charity. And then eventually this verse of trade and the lending or loan, the longest verse in the Quran, and then followed by the verse that says, in case you are in traveling and there is no nobody to write the contract or the memo between you, then there is another mechanism like collateral or something. And then amazingly, Quran tells us that the one who writes the contract has to be protected, and the witnesses have to be protected. So now we're getting to the verse, start to 2:8, the last three verses in Surah Al-Baqarah. So we cover them, inshallah, and when we'll have time for discussion and feedback. This is the nature of this deen. After telling you what needs to be done and what is it that you're supposed to do, it's always, there is the verses, most of the time they conclude with a touch of Tawheed, because Islam does not want us to rely completely to do things because they are to do things or avoid things just because of the law. It takes us a step higher than that. That even if you can manage, if there is a loophole or if the legal loophole, or if you can, you still have to do the right thing. So it's always linked to your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is even higher than anything else that a human being can come up with, because at the end of the day, that's between you and yourself. And even if nobody is watching, even if something is legal, even if you can get away with it, there is a higher level where, because Allah is watching, you're not going to do it. So that's why most of the verses, or many of the verses in Quran, they end up with the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is the incentive and the deterrence that works for believers more than anything else. So Islam does not rely on fixing things by law, but on purifying the human soul and the human heart and mind, and then, of course, there is a need for the law, and obeying the law. It's part of the religion because that's a contract. But Islam relies more on self-restraint, taqwa. People will restrain themselves from doing anything that Allah does not like, and anything that Allah does not like is harmful, and anything that Allah likes is beneficial. لله ما في السماوات. So after والله بما تعملون عليم, which is very strong language that Allah knows what you do, everything that you do. Now it's more incentive or more توحيد touch. لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض. That's one aspect of the tawheed, which to Allah belongs everything in heaven and in earth. And then وإن تبدوا ما في أنفسكم أو تخفوه يحاسبكم به الله. طيب لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض. Whatever is in the heavens and in the earth belongs to Allah. So that's a very important aspect of Tawheed, that everything belongs to Allah. That's a lot, yani. And though if I really recommend that everybody try to educate yourself a little bit about astronomy. You don't have to become an expert. There is a lot of scientific material for non-scientists. And you can see, I mean, this universe, when I say everything belongs to Allah, that's big, because this whole earth on the universe is a very small dot, yani. And then distance between earth and the sun is 150 million kilometers. To Allah belongs, that's powerful. And then Allah knows what you know, what you reveal and what you conceal. Whatever you reveal or conceal, whether you reveal or conceal your thoughts, Allah will call you to account for them. That's a bit explanation. First of all, implicitly it's saying that Allah knows what you reveal and conceal, and that's big. So there is, everything belongs to Allah, and now that Allah knows everything. So these transcendent attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like with no limit. So everything belongs to Allah. Allah knows everything you reveal or conceal. Now, يحاسبكم به الله. Of course, this was explained that Allah will not hold you accountable for your thoughts as long as you don't act on them. Allah is merciful, will not punish or will hold somebody accountable for something that is out of your control. Yani, this is a feeling or thoughts that comes to your mind. So you're not responsible, as it was really confirmed clearly, even though the verse may indicate otherwise. But people are not responsible for what their thoughts and their feeling, etc. These are out of control, as long as they don't act on them. وإن تبدوا ما في أنفسكم وتخفوه يحاسبكم بالله. Again, another transcendent. فيغفر لمن يشاء ويعذب من يشاء. So we have, to Allah belongs everything, and then He knows everything, and then He forgives. يغفر لمن يشاء ويعذب من يشاء. يعني He will forgive whoever He will, and punish whoever He will. That's also very strong. Yani that's transcendent power. Yani. So transcendent kingdom or ownership of this universe, and then transcendent knowledge. You conceal something, nobody can see it, Allah knows it. And then transcendent or forgives whoever He will, forgive whoever He will, and punish whoever He will. That's very powerful. It's just our hearts, they grow hard. They're not very receptive to these things. These things are very powerful messages. Yeah. And then, of course, concludes by Wallahu ala kulli shay'in qadir, another transcendent, that His power. He has power over all things. Yani, just put them together. We start with لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض. Then, so everything belongs to Him. He knows everything, whether you reveal it or conceal it. And then He will forgive whoever He will. He will punish whoever He will. And then He has power over all things. That's just in one verse. It's a very powerful verse of Tawheed. of Allah. It is meant, this verse is meant to work on that relationship between you and Allah. Oh, didn't I start the video? I thought I started. Let's see here. No, it is there. This was very good conclusion. Most scholars and interpretation, they put it as a conclusion for the rest. So there is separation now. The last two verses are separate from this. This was conclusion of everything that was mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah. So there is a lot of commandments in Surah Al-Baqarah, a lot of do's and don'ts. So they were concluded with a very high dose, very concentrated dose of Tawheed. Starting with the knowledge first, but that was for a specific thing. And then with the one verse that has a very high dose of Tawheed and different aspects. 5 or 6 aspects of Tawheed in one verse. That's very, very strong. Why these things? These are the things that Quran relies on as a guarantee for people to do what they're supposed to do. Because Muslims, when you tell them that Allah knows everything, and can you make sure that everybody is muted, please? Muslims with these verses of Tawheed, they become very, very motivated in. So every time, and keep in mind that Surah Al-Baqarah had a lot of commandments. There was qital, jihad, sadaqah. It's heavy. It's very heavy, and the role of believers, they're supposed to be shuhada al nas, and leaders and models, and it was concluded with this very concentrated verse of Tawheed. طيب آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون كل آمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله وقالوا سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير. Brothers, please make sure that everybody is muted so that there is no background noise, please. So آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون. Beautiful, putting Rasul and believers at the same word. The messenger believes in what has been sent down to him from his Lord, as do the faithful, the believers. They all believe in Allah, His angels, His scriptures, and His messengers. We make no distinctions between any of His messengers. So let's stop here before we continue. آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون كل آمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله. طيب. Here it's the articles of faith, Allah, believing in Allah, angels, scriptures, and messengers. But there is something here, there is a nice or an interesting indication. When says the believers believes in all previous messengers, that confirms an important concept that we have to be aware of, which is that we inherited, or Muslims have inherited, the mission of all the prophets and the nations before. So آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه والمؤمنون لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله confirms that they came with the same message with some variations just to be relevant to different contexts, and then this succession of messenger and scriptures were concluded, and now this mission became the mission of every human being who accepts, of course. So that's not even a mission of believers. This is the mission of humanity. This is the mission of humanity. It is being presented to all of humanity. Some of them accept, and they become believers or accept that and commit to that mission. Some they don't, but it is a mission not for Muslims, because Muslims is not a sect. It's not a race. It's a mission that you accept. So it is after Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which with the universal and timeless message that was sent, which Allah promised to preserve, and which, so the mission, it is no longer assigned to individuals. It is no longer assigned to one nation like Bani Israel before. It is a mission that became universal for every human being to accept it and embrace and fulfill it. That's an important thing. Now, وقالوا سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير. That's very very spiritual. I mean, part of the verse. وقالوا سمعنا وأطعنا. طيب, this applies to everything before. So everything that was mentioned and everything that is coming, the attitude of the believers is we hear and we obey. We hear and obey. That's very important. And by the way, this سمعنا وأطعنا, unfortunately, it was abused by some Muslim groups, because this belongs only to Allah. There is nobody that you tell them, I hear and obey. You hear and think, and have your and discuss, and ask to be convinced. But hearing and obeying, sama ta'a, that's only for Allah. And when His messenger is speaking as a prophet, not even as a leader, because as a leader they discussed and they disagreed with him, and they had different opinion. When he speaks as a prophet, then it's the same thing. But and it was very rare, by the way, during the life of Rasulullah ﷺ, was very rare. Other than that, I don't know where many Muslim groups, by the way, from the whole range, they came up with this idea that you should deal with your leader or with your group or whatever this way, that you hear and obey. There is no such thing as hearing and obeying except with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Other than that, everybody else you can ask. Even the biggest scholar on earth will tell you something, say, give me the evidence. Yani, why? So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains His commandments in Quran, I mean, who else is gonna ask us just to obey Him blindly? And by the way, obeying a person blindly was explained by the Prophet as worshipping. Obeying a person blindly, it's like worshipping. It's like shirk. Where this came? It came in the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was reciting a verse from Surah Al-Ma'idah, when he said, اتخذوا أحبارهم ورهبانهم أربابا من دون الله. That people before us, they took their religious leaders as their Lord, or God. So there was someone who converted to Islam, said, but Prophet of Allah, no, we never obeyed them. And the Rasul ﷺ told him that, the Prophet told him that, didn't you follow them blindly, whatever they say? He said, yes, so that's your worship to them. So people have to be very careful about this, because I can see now many Islamic groups, they have this idea, so either political Islam, Sufi Islam, Salafi, whatever, all kinds. They got this wrong idea that you should just hear and obey. There is no such thing. That's totally wrong. That belongs only to Allah. Hear and obey. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he was alive and when he was speaking as a prophet. But when he was speaking as a leader, the companions, they said, no, we have a better opinion. And he accepted that from them. So, سمعنا وأطعنا. The touch here, the nice touch, is that even as you are here and obey, you're not sure that you're going to live up to the expectation. So there is غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير. Beautiful, eloquent. That yes, we're going to try, we're committing, we will hear and obey, we will do everything that is expected from us, but we're not sure we're going to live up to the expectation. So forgive our shortcomings. So immediately after hear and obey, غفرانك, grant us your forgiveness, our Lord. And then recognizing that you're going to return to Him. To you, we all return. You can see that belief in the hereafter, recognizing that no matter what you do, you will never be able to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enough. for everything that he has given you. وإن تعدوا نعمة الله لا تحصوها. So there is غفرانك. Grant us your forgiveness, even though we just said we're going to hear and obey, but we know that we're going to try, we're going to do our best, but more than likely we're going to fall short. غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير. This reminds me of something that we do and we don't pay attention to it. We take it like normal, even though it's not really very normal. As soon as we finish prayer, we make istighfar. And that should, you may wonder, we're just prayed. No, you're making istighfar, you're asking for forgiveness, you're acknowledging that your prayer was not good enough. It's in a way you're saying that inshallah next prayer I'm going to try harder. So immediately as soon as we say assalamu alaikum, we make istighfar. This is very similar here. سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير. طيب, people under this attitude, people are worried they're going to fall short, comes reassurance. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. And in Surah Al-Talaq, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا ما أتاها. So لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها ولا يكلف الله نفسا إلا ما أتاها. Allah does not burden any soul with more than it can bear. Very clear. طيب, this verse, and some of you heard me, especially in khutbah, I always say this is very abused. It's misunderstood because there is وسعها. People don't pay attention to it. ولا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah does not ask you to do more than what you can, but there is implicitly, there is another segment. It's not mentioned, but you should understand it. It's an implicit, which is that Allah asks you to do all that you can. Because that's the meaning of وسعها. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah does not ask you to do more than what you can. Implicitly, it says that Allah asks you and expects you to do everything you can. But our people never pay attention to the second part. They use the first part as an excuse for failing to do their or to do what they're supposed to do. ولا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. No, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها means that وسعها, meaning that nothing beyond your limits, but all your limits, everything that you can. لها ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت. That's a very powerful principle. Individual responsibility. لها ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت. That's a very we take it for granted. لا تزر وازرة وزر أخرى. وأن ليس للإنسان إلا ما سعى. This individual responsibility and accountability is extremely important. It makes people busy with themselves, not busy with others. It helps eliminating this judgmental attitude of it helps. If we understand this verse, this principle, which was mentioned before, I think we mentioned it before when تلك أمة قد خلت لها ما كسبت ولكم ما كسبتم. We understand this, we shouldn't have problem of Sunnah and Shia, because everybody is responsible for what they did. لها تلك أمة قد خلت لها ما كسبت ولكم ما كسبتم. Everybody is responsible for what they have done, and you should not remain stuck. You should not remain stuck in part of history. History is only good for lessons, so that's for history. And for now, just be busy with yourself. Just keep yourself busy with what you're doing, because at the end of the day, you're responsible only for yourself. You're responsible to deliver the message. You're responsible to do what you're supposed to do, but you're not responsible for others. So لها ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت. Very accurate. ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا. Another acknowledgement of shortcoming. Yes, we're going to hear and obey, but غفرانك. And then we're going to hear and obey, but لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا وأخطأنا. We're a human being. At the end of the day, do not take us to task if we forget or make mistakes. Mistake is a human. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to be striving all the time. Prevention first, and then if it happens, and is going to happen, that you're going to make a mistake, is to recover quickly and repent. And that's the struggle. Nafs al-lawama. That's a struggle that Allah is not expecting us to be perfect. Of course, we should not take it lightly. We should always try hard with prevention first, and take all precautions not to make a mistake. But mistake is a human. Allah loves those who repent quickly. So ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا وأخطأنا. There are people who realize how big this mission is, how big these expectations, how high the expectations are. So they're saying, we're going to hear and obey, but forgive us, يعني غفرانك. And then we're going to hear and obey, but don't take us to task, يعني if we forget or if we make mistakes. And then more. ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا. This is really, يعني Quran speaking on behalf of Muslims, recognizing their weaknesses and their dependence on Allah, complete dependence on Allah. Lord, do not burden us as you burdened those before us. As we have seen before, there are people of Bani Israel, when they violated or did not fulfill the mission that was assigned to them, there was some punishment, or life was made harder. So believers here are saying that guide us so that we will not fall in the same trap and we don't end up punished the same way. لا تحمل علينا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا burden كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا. يعني the mission is already big, يعني, and help us fulfilling it so that we don't fall in the same trap, because if we fail, then they're going to be burdened even with punishment. So mission, and the mission is huge, and then on top of it will be punishment. So they're praying to Allah and making supplications to keep us focused on the mission so that we don't end up burdened with punishment like the people before us. ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به. So لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. And now that was an assurance, and now there is a prayer, supplication. Lord, do not burden us with more than we have strength to bear. These are people who are realizing, Quran is speaking on their behalf, realizing how high the expectations are, how big the mission is. They're asking for help. They're asking for forgiveness if they fall short, because even though they're going to try hard, but they know that they may not live up to the expectation completely. So from now they're asking for forgiveness. They're asking not to take us to task if we forget or make mistake, and then don't burden us with like we did with people before us who failed. In other words, help us succeeding so that we don't fail and end up burdened like them. And now do not burden us with things that are beyond our capacity. لا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به. واعف عنا. All of it is recognizing how big the mission is, how high the expectations are, and then the concern that we may fall short. So there is a lot. It's full of recognition and acknowledgement of weakness in the last verses of the Baqarah. It's people realizing that they're making big commitment. There is a high expectation. There is big mission. And we're going to do our best. We're going to hear and obey. We're going to put our lives on the line if it takes. But praying to Allah to forgive if we fall short, and not to take us to task if we forget or make a mistake, not to burden us with like people before us, and not to burden us with more than what we, and then again, forgive us. غفرانك over there, and اعفو عنا واغفر لنا here. اعفو عنا واغفر لنا. يعني, so it start, the two verses start with غفرانك, and now pardon us, forgive us. and have mercy on us. يعني the beautiful words يعني اعفو عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا. Pardon us, forgive us, and have mercy on us. Why? Because we're sincere, we're gonna try hard, we're not gonna spare any efforts, but we still know, we still realize that we need your forgiveness and you need, because we're not gonna meet the expectations. No matter how hard we try and how close we get, we're still worried that we're gonna fall short. I mean, just compare these with Muslims today. And I don't think you can find more contrast. People are really taking it very lightly, at ease, no worry. And then nobody is worried about falling short. Nobody is trying even hard. Nobody, I mean, it's not nobody, but the vast majority of people are very complacent. Vast majority of people have no clue about the expectations, have no clue about their mission, have no clue about their role, and they're thinking that these whatever they're doing, that's good enough. And some of them, even that minimum, there are many Muslims who even the minimum is not there, and yet they're very comfortable. They're not worried at all. أنت مولانا, that's need help, you are our protector. فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. You are our protector, so help us against the disbelievers. Of course, kafirin here, we're going to just reflect for a couple minutes. We have a mission. Mission has those goals. On top of those goals is justice. For justice to prevail. Remember the goals, at least that's my definition of the goals of Islam, is that justice is on top because of the verse in Surah Al-Hadid. Freedom, peace, security, human dignity, prosperity, and virtue. 7 goals that I deduct that this religion came to fulfill. These people have that mission. And then, of course, to deliver the message to all humanity in the best possible way, to be role models. It's a lot. So they're asking for help. Qawm al-Kafirin here, nobody should misunderstand this, that you're going to go to find somebody who's disbeliever and then you're going to fight. No, that's not the idea. Is you have that mission to fulfill. And of course, it's no secret in this world, there are people who are going to resist those reform and establishing justice because there are people who are benefiting from the situation. I mean, if you remember when people were advocating against slavery here or against segregation, there are people on the other side. So in all good causes, there are people who will oppose. So Allah in the Quran is saying on behalf of believers, while you're reciting this, it's asking Allah to help you against those who are standing there. So kafirin here, it doesn't mean someone who just chose not to accept Islam, and you're asking Allah to support you against that person. Because we go back, la ikraha fi din. There is no compulsion in religion. We're talking about people who are standing in the way, opposing those overarching goals of Islam. You're advocating it in society. You're advocating for justice, and there are people who are advocating in the opposite direction. And so you're asking Allah in that civic engagement. Of course, it's always civic, except in self-defense, like a country that is attacked or something. But other than that, it's that civic engagement, asking Allah to help you in serving His cause against all the resistance and opposition. Can I stop here, inshallah, and then we'll dedicate the rest of the time for discussions or questions or comments about what we covered today, about anything that we covered before. So the floor is yours.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Suhail.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much for all this knowledge. May Allah bless you and be pleased with you, inshallah. May we be among
all
those
of
who
us,
follow,
inshallah.
inshallah. I mean, I have my question first is about the issue you talk on obedience.
Mhm.
So this comes about in terms of parenting. As you know, we are raised in a culture that sometimes the father or the man in the house, when he says something, you have to obey, and the parents are, expecting the same way, the same reaction for the kid to the kids. I say this, follow it, don't argue, don't question, and we've seen it doesn't work, and in the end, also it's the whole system is broken. Even our kids, when they go to the to schools or masajid, not schools, at least there's that understanding maybe to some extent. But I think if there's a case where a kid disobeyed in the masjid and he was very harshly treated. So like things like that, where we don't have tolerance towards one another, towards our kids, towards, like, the whole respect is lost. So how do we handle this? Because of this expectation of, this is what I want, you should do what I say. So I don't know how we can
And
fix this.
I mean, there is no easy way. It's a total mess. Yani, the way we raise our children, except some, there is always some exceptions, but we're talking about the general trend. No, we're not patient, so that we keep explaining to children and train them to be convinced rather than just impose things on them. Unfortunately, this is our culture. Our culture is we tend to look for the easy way, and the easy way, just do as as I tell you. Yani. The other way requires that you're gonna sit down and explain. This is better. That's the right way. That's why, etc. We don't want to do that. Um, there is a lot of, it's a whole paradigm that need to be changed, because many Muslims are the product of dictatorship and oppressive regimes, and oppression and dictatorship trickles down. Yani. It trickles down. It starts on the top from government, and then goes to the teacher in the school, and then to the parents, and then probably husband on wife. And I mean, it's a whole paradigm of everybody oppressing whoever he can. Yani. So whoever has power will oppress others. Yani. And the police officer in the street will oppress the drivers, and everybody is oppressing everybody. Yani. And that's, unfortunately, that has been there for a long time. Yani. Because even what they call Khilafah, it was a dictatorship. Yani. It's a dictatorship. It's a totalitarian regime that was inherited dynasties. Yani. So it's not going to be easy. We just have to try, especially those of us who came to this country and raised children here. We have no excuse not to learn alternative ways of raising good children. I mean, the Prophet ﷺ, he was encouraged his companions to discuss with him and to have their opinion, and always consulting, yani, because the Prophet is a teacher. Yani. Prophet is a teacher. He was teaching us to be doing that all the time, and not in the position, only position of leadership, but even as a parent, or even in all contexts. If you want to be like the Prophet, you should be in the business of consulting and seeking opinion, and train people to have that critical thinking and critical mind. Yani. Unfortunately, that's not how we raise our children. We raise them to, and by the way, most of the time it backfires. Yani. Most of the time, they will hear and obey as long they are dependent on you, and then they will rebel. Yani. So we end up going to the other extreme. Even prayer, a lot of parents, a lot of Muslim parents, they force prayers and they force things on their children, so they keep doing it until they are independent. Yani. The moment they are independent, say, forget it. Yani. So a lot need to be changed in our mindset first, and then to have that patience and to abandon those old ways of relying on the power and imposing your will on people rather than convincing. Again, I know some people are trying. There are many people who probably did better job than others, but in general, our community brought almost all the problems from the Muslim world. They brought them they brought those problems with them here. So basically, it's like becoming a microcosm of the Muslim world. So our mindset has to be reformatted. Yeah, it was wired in the wrong way. It was wired with a lot of misconceptions. It was not trained to have that critical thinking, and and there is also sometimes we don't even build the self-confidence in our children, and we raise them with the not very confident in themselves. And it's never too late for anybody who is serious. They just have to start educating themselves. Alhamdulillah, material nowadays is available, very available, yani, in online, audio, video. Just train yourself on how to raise your children, or how to build that critical mindset, or how to I mean, everything can be learned. We just have to accept, to be humble, that we need to learn. You cannot say because we have that problem that we think that we know everything and therefore we don't need to learn, and that's not true. Same thing, by the way, applies to spousal relationships. Same thing. I mean, it's a lot of work need to be done to remake the Muslim mind and the Muslim personality after all the damage that happened to it over centuries.
Thank you very much. Jazakallah khair.
Maybe
Maybe one time we could consider another class we have for getting this, learning about this, just focusing on how we can build ourselves as parents, and maybe parenting, inshallah. Okay, I have another question. It's I think you explained this before, but I'm just struggling understanding. So it's the verses concerning polytheist. So the verses that speaks about Allah condemning. 1 minute, sorry, I have this verse in Surah Muhammad. So when it says like those who disobey the prophets and those who disbelieve, their deeds will not be accepted by Allah, and never will they receive any forgiveness. So how do we interpret these verses?
This is
Surah
الذين
Muhammad.
كفروا صدوا شقوا لن يضر أتهم كفارا فلن يغفر الله لهم. This is Surah, it's verse 34, right?
Yes.
إن الذين كفروا وصدوا عن سبيل الله.
Yes.
ثم ماتوا وهم كفار فلن يغفر الله لهم.
Even not even about, yeah, in general, when you read this surah, there's a lot about like a lot about the even the other one, worldly life is on. No, sorry. There's also another one. Wait, sorry. It's general, like Allah is not going to
forgive. I mean, these people who fought, these are not the people who rejected the message. These are people who saddu an sabilillah. These people who have fought hard, against those who are calling for Allah, or against. I mean, we're talking about people like oppressive or dictator who will punish and torture and kills people just because they chose this religion, and then they die in that situation. So we're talking about an extreme case. because صدوا عن سبيل الله وماتوا وهم كفار. يعني they died in that situation, in that conditions, while they're fighting and punishing and torturing and maybe executing people who are just chose the religion. So that's an extreme case, and Allah is saying that He's not going to forgive them. All right, let's see if there are other questions or comments.
شكرا.
جزاك الله خير, Sister Amina.
وإياك.
Any other questions? I really strongly recommend that you go back and reflect on this surah or this chapter of the Quran. Is it's about much until let's see. It's probably 10%, not less than 10%, probably 9% or 8% of the. Is it? Yeah.
Which one? What are you? I don't
Surah Al-Baqarah is about 8% of the Quran. I mean, that's a lot. That's about 1/10 or 1/12. Yeah. So it's an important surah that people need to reflect and take notes. And go ahead, brother.
السلام عليكم brother.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
كيف الحال؟
الحمد لله. الحمد لله.
السلام عليكم. It's really amazing how the Surah Al-Baqarah ends and how it relates to the beginning of the surah. This is one thing to notice, especially that the first ayat of the surah. Plus, especially when it talks about Arkan al-Iman. آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون كل آمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله. And in the end, it mentioned أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. So all of this is really amazing, and all of this, the way that it connects with the beginning of the surah with the end of the surah is really important. The other thing is, like as you mentioned, Surah Al-Baqarah is 1/8 probably of the Quran. It talks about ibadat, and I'm kind of like, it's a Makkiyah, is that correct? And that's what takes me to something else. I was listening to this last week. I was researching about trying to learn more about the Sunnah and about the struggle of different people trying to claim about the Sunnah and the problems of the Sunnah. And I really think that we need to educate. It's like, as we're reading the Quran and we relate to Sunnah, there is a lot of ayahs mentioned in the Quran that talks about how God will protect His word and the Sunnah, because the Sunnah, a lot of the Sunnah is part, and especially when we say Hadith Sahih, these are Wahi words. So. And this is, it's like just my perspective of this, just looking and researching of issues about the Sunnah or how to look at the Sunnah. It's really important. And the Sunnah wasn't just written the way that the Quran was written during the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Probably there is like two stories, or there is some hadith that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the beginning, he didn't ask people to write the hadith, and this is something that I think it's important to understand. and to understand why it wasn't. Because if we look here about the ibadat and how long it took the ibadat in the Quran and for us to understand those, and especially that things came in different periods of time, it seems like Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam started asking to write the hadith after Fath Makkah probably. And there is some stories about that as well. Is that correct? And I don't want to be mixing things.
No. Even Umar ibn Khattab did not allow writing hadith. No. But so it happened very late, way late.
Okay, so the argument about that is that Prophet Muhammad during his life, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam during his life, he had Abu Huraira. Abu Huraira lived during the Prophet, and Abu Huraira wasn't like one of the richest people in the world, and he was issued to take like an income or somehow an ajr during the time when he was working in collecting the hadith. So Abu Huraira lived in Medina, I believe, about some people say 4 months, but the actual time is, I believe it's about 4.5 years. 3.5 of them was very close to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, and Abu Huraira, if we take a look at that, and this is where the argument of like it was written, the hadith was written after, because the hadith was written during the Sahaba. It was collected and how you call it, they selected what was authentic and what was mutadawal, what was repeated between the people, and what was authentic after the history of the Prophet. And that is correct. But there was a lot of the Sahaba who used to write. And the example of Abu Huraira, for example, would be a good example, because they mentioned that Abu Huraira by himself had about 800 students who studied at his time. And Abu Huraira, afterwards, he starts writing himself. He was repeating things, and the students used to write, and they used to authenticate with him and repeat it to him for him to agree or not agree. And the same thing happened with other scholars. I'm not talking about Abu Huraira only, but Abu Huraira himself had 800 students studying with him. And those 800 students, they used to go and reference things with others. And this start making a little bit more sense. And I'm sorry for interrupting. Just one second.
No, go ahead.
And this start making a lot more sense when it comes that there is many ayat in the Quran that talks about protecting the Quran and the Sunnah, and there is ayahs in the Quran who requires from us to take what Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave us. And as you mentioned, there is a difference between what came from the Wahy and what came from his mind, and what we can discuss and what we can't. So, and if we look at the Hadith al-Sahih, and I'm just saying this because there was lots of mixing in the stories, and one of them is like the argument of what you just mentioned about it was written afterwards. It makes sense that it was written afterwards. If I was going to write about what happened in Palestine before 1948, the history was written afterwards. A lot of the things that I learned about my grandfather, it was through things that he probably said to my father when he was sitting and playing Tawlid Zahar with him, for example. I'm just saying, like, these things are, it's like, but there was things that even the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught the Sahaba and have them repeated. And there is stories like he repeated himself 3 times in some of the cases, and maybe more, when he was teaching them about the hadith or about like the Quran in general. And probably he repeated himself more. The other thing with the hadith is like the students who learn the hadith, there is what they call, and this is another thing that I really like to learn more about, which is more about الرحلة في طلب الحديث. It seems like when you hear about that, And some of the stories about that, it seemed like it was very interesting and exciting about like how some of the scholars used to travel from Baghdad to Egypt to somewhere else, trying to verify one hadith only. And when we talk about authentic hadith, we're talking about like short hadith. It's not like it's multiple lines. The majority of a lot of those hadiths was very short.
The topic of hadith, Muhammad, it's a huge and requires more than one session because there are a lot of things that need to be mentioned. We just want to put things back on perspective that the priority should go to the Quran. There is no question about it. And Muslims should put more time on studying the Quran because that's something that has faded. And then it did not even stop in hadith, because after the hadith, even the hadith itself started to be abandoned, and Muslims relied on the books of heritage, which is the Turath. We're going to have to put things back on perspective that the top priority should go to the Quran. The hadith should be studied in the light of the Quran. And then in that perspective or framework, that at the end of the day, not every hadith will be valid for all times and all places, like not every verse is valid for all times and all places. The Quran in its totality is valid always, but you cannot pick just a verse and apply it in any context. Same thing with the hadith. So it's really, the issue of the hadith or the topic is a little bit sensitive, and probably one time we can just focus on it. And then what's the best way of leveraging the seerah and the sunnah of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam without making some very common mistakes, which is when you give priority to the hadith over the Quran. That's bad, that's wrong. When you are not selective, for example, the seerah is full of Israeliyat, of things that are not really authentic at all. That's why you find the same incident narrated in a very completely different ways. And so what's the best way to study the life and the personality of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? Because he's our role model. In his model, there is a model of building and leading a community. In his personal behavior and character and worship is the role model of every one of us, or should be the role model of every one of us. But I can see a lot of very common mistakes when people study the seerah and the hadith, and they focus and they mix the authentic with non-authentic, or they apply hadith in the wrong context, or rather than focusing on the worship and the character of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and his dedication to the cause of Allah, they focus on his appearance, for example, and that becomes the main issue. The way he dresses, or the way so a lot of things need to be fixed when it comes to the seerah, because it's a wonderful source of guidance that goes hand in hand with the Quran, provided it is done the right way.
Jazakallah khair, Dr. Ghannouchi. I do have a topic that was suggested by a sister. She said that, in addition to the topic that Sister Amina provided, another sister was saying that, she's suggesting that maybe we spend a lecture on the verse that says, وَالْقَاضِمِينَ الْغَيْظِ وَالْعَافِينَ عَنِ النَّاسِ. If we can spend a lecture on that, because to suppress your anger and how to do it, and how to forgive people, when to forgive people, it's a very involved process. So if we can do that at a future date.
Inshallah.
I do have one more question, Doctor, if that is possible. I had a question from my son, and I grew up knowing that Islam came and ended slavery. But there was still slavery, and there continued to be slavery. So is that correct or not? Or Islam didn't come to end, or slavery didn't end, and until today there is some evidence of it, and they claim that there is some evidence of slavery in some areas in Sudan, for example.
Well, this is has to be taken in the context. The Quran was revealed in a society where slavery is an integral part of the economy. It's not like it never condoned or endorsed it, but it had to be fixed. So as usual, it's like the alcohol was an integral part of the lives of the Arabs. So that we didn't see a verse that comes from day one say you need to stop drinking, because then probably nobody will respond or nobody will answer. So Quran and Islam as a very practical religion and very pragmatic, takes those complicated issues and solve them gradually or solve them. It's not like acknowledging them, but we know the things that are imposed from above, they never works. They never work. Remember prohibition here. I mean, it's these complicated social societies, they have to be resolved from the roots. So, I mean, as bad as it is, I mean, nobody can. It's slavery is one of the most brutal things that the human being has done to each other, yani. But at that time, it was part of the economy, and there was properties, and where people have their capital and they spend money, etc. So Islam came and then basically stopped it and start resolving it. It's like riba. Don't do it anymore, and now let's take care of the previous of the past. Gradually it was resolved, because as you can see, any kafara, anytime you make a mistake and you want to fix it, you free your slave. People were encouraged to free slaves, and they were freeing them left and right. Islam created a path for slaves to free themselves at that time. So it really attacked it from all angles and made it for Muslims clear that this is not something that Allah likes or something. So people were really getting rid of it. I mean, in a very aggressive way, and ended up to be solved. I mean, to be resolved. So any abuse that was done in history of Islam, that's not Islam. Yani. I know that under the dynasty rules, there were, I mean, lot of abuse. Yani. Some of those Khalifa of what they call them Khalifa Abbasi or Uthmani, etc. They kind of like 500s or 1,000 Jariyah in their castle. Yani. It has nothing to do with Islam. I mean, these practices, unfortunately, Muslims put themselves in the defensive to try to justify everything that happened in the history of Islam, even though you don't have to. Yani. I mean, that has nothing to do with Islam. That's history of Muslims. It has a lot of abuse that Islam has nothing to do with. It was done in spite of Islam, not because of it. So bottom line, anybody who understands this religion, understands the position of a human dignity in Islam, understands the importance or how critical freedom is, understands how critical justice is, and slavery is against all of these. It's against justice, it's against freedom, it's against the human dignity, it's against everything. Yeah. Anybody who understands Islam knows that this is something that Allah does. I mean, this is not something that Allah accepts, but again, Islam came and find very messy society at that time. And you know, this religion is practical. It could have from day one says, this is it. This is what you supposed to do. And now decision, no more slavery. Decision, no more drinking. But nobody will respond, yani. So what's the point, yani? what's the point of doing it rather than trying to fix it? So I really encourage people to read about the society of the Arabian Peninsula and how messy it was at that time, and how Quran had that difficult task of fixing that society at the same time establishing principles that are valid for all times and all places, which is not simple. There is a society that is total mess, and then you need to fix it. So you need medicine and solution to that society, but you need principles that will be valid for all places and all times. And Quran did it beautifully. Of course, that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the key was that this religion came flexible and left a big room for ijtihad, which that's the point that we missed. That's how it will remain relevant, it will remain fresh all the time. But when we stopped that ijtihad, we ended up with a version of Islam that was frozen at certain era in history and certain part of the world, and then they were struggling to make it relevant in different parts or different contexts. Even though we're not supposed to. I mean, if we continued that important task of ijtihad, contextualizing the text, trying to fulfill and achieve the goals of Islam or maqasid while respecting the thawabit, the things that are constant, if we continue doing that, we never had any problem addressing even issues that were not there before, that they came up now. We go back and we find some guidance, not necessarily exact detailed answers, but we can find some inspiration in Islam that will guide us on how to address that issue. That's exercise that we stopped doing for a long time.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Sahel.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I have another issue I'd like to raise. I think now that we are going to New Year, inshallah, and the vaccine is coming, inshallah, we need to plan ourselves on post-2020, post-COVID strategies. And one of the issues that we've been talking a lot is about starting a community center. And this is something that you've always said you are very open and very kind of interested in it. And all of us know this is something we all want, but I think we haven't really decided, we haven't made any strategy to it. And this is the time. I think we've learned a lot in this year. So what is your guidance on this? I think there's no time, not now. If you're not going to plan, then we'll keep talking. And we are seeing the mess that it's still, we're still in it, and the COVID situation has made it even worse. So please help us to take action. Thank you.
We have been saying this a long time ago that unfortunately in our evolution or community development, we stopped short because I can see the Islamic center like the elementary school or middle school, and then the community center will be like the high school. If this community was planned the right way and has really leadership with the vision, then we should have made that step, that after establishing Islamic centers, then several Islamic centers in the metro area will come together and build a community center that will serve all of them, serve the whole community, and then do it right, do it with taking advantage of the opportunities here. There are grants in this country available, and there are so many ways that it can be done in an efficient way rather than just relying on donation. And unfortunately, we stopped. We did not do that. There is a very poor coordinations between Islamic centers, and everybody is trying to reinvent the wheel or do their own thing. And that's why we didn't make that important step, which I believe should have happened, and it still can happen. that in every metro area or every place where you have 4, 5, 6 Islamic centers, they can come together and establish a real community center with all the facilities that are needed for a vibrant social life for Muslims, rather than the kind of life that unfortunately our community is living now. And it's having a very heavy toll on families and children, because it's very artificial or very unusual. Muslims are largely still isolated, except few who have some sort of ethnic community. They have a little bit of social life, but vast majority of Muslim families, they live in isolations. Their children are raised in a very abnormal way, because there is no natural environment in which they grow. We take them most of the time by force, or almost force them or push them to come to the mosque when they are young. The mosque has hardly anything for people after they go beyond a certain age, because the facilities are really not adequate. Most mosques are not family friendly, so they don't help integrating family and solidifying it. It's the other way around. It's a lot of work and a lot of revisiting many things that we took for granted, and with having a community that still evaluate its work by how big the mosque is and how many activities we have and how many Jumu'ah we have, or how many pray Jumu'ah. Until now, these are the performance indicators, yani. And that means nothing, yani. It's really very, very poor way to evaluate your work when you start evaluating your success by how many activities you organized, or how many people attended, or how many people pray, or you did remodeling or expansion of the mosque. That becomes like achievements, yani, which is very, very unfortunate, yani. There is no vision. There are no clear leadership or directions. There is no real community development or growth. We're still, conducting our affairs like basically transient community, firefighting, ensuring the minimum, and always never, hardly proactive. Most of the time is just reacting, and most of the time we're working day to day and firefighting mode of operation. So it's very painful when we talk about our community. We have a lot of potential that is untapped. That's probably the good news. But it's unfortunate that we are not leveraging all the resources available and all the opportunities and the potential that we have. Yeah.
So what's the strategy? Where can we start?
Well, that's for another meeting, for another time. Yeah, there is no easy way for this. There is no easy solutions, and we should forget about easy solution for anything, especially when you come late and you miss a lot of opportunities. We have to have the courage to confront the brutal realities and facts, and do what needs to be done, even if it is not convenient, and forget about the things that they may make us feel good, but they're leading us nowhere.
Dr. Ghannouchi, I was told that the land around the Shirley Gate Mosque has a lot of potential. Like it's a big lot that is not developed. Do you think they would be open to maybe doing a study for a community center near Shirley Gate Mosque?
I doubt it. They have some permit problems, but I doubt it, because we don't have neither Shirley Gate or any. Except with very few exceptions, our mosques are not really managed in a way that allow for these big projects without major problems. Yeah. I mean, our mosque, they're still, sometimes they make big issue or differences about simple activity. Yeah. So project like these requires a level of maturity, individual and organizational maturity that I don't think we have it yet. For people to come together, especially more than one mosque. I don't know. I mean, it's a vicious cycle that can be broken only with. We had some opportunities in the history of our community that we missed them badly. Yani. It's not every other day that in the community emerges leadership with a vision. Yani. But we are very good in we don't miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. Yani. So we always sometimes we become afraid of success. So we are become much more comfortable with failure. So even when it seems that we are getting there, we go back to our comfort zone. I mean, it's a culture of failure that finds it much easier to justify failure than to create a success. So community with no leadership, with no vision, what we have is management, Jazakumullah khair, and activists. They're doing their best to keep things running, but you don't expect leadership and vision. It's not, we don't have it yet. We have imams, we have managers, we have administrators, we have speakers, we have activists, we have volunteers, but when it comes to, we're largely leaderless community.
Yeah, I guess for the time being, unfortunately, the parents will have to find activities for their kids in other community centers or by doing, organized sports, participating in activities provided after-school activities for kids, because it's we, like you said, Dr. Anushi, it's unfortunately we're not there yet.
Mm-hmm. Inshallah, we're trying our best. Inshallah, and try to mentor generation of Muslims with the higher aspirations and with the more higher level of sophistication. Because I mean, we have enough mediocrity. I don't think we can afford to continue with this way of doing business. If we don't have any other questions, we can inshallah stop and then we'll continue inshallah next week inshallah.
Okay, Jazakallah khair, Dr. Anushi. Thank you for joining. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.